My younger sister fell in love with Prince Adrian under my name on the night of our grand wedding. The prince realized that he had married the wrong person. Then, the sister he deeply loved set herself on fire and perished in the flames. As a result, the prince hated me with all his heart, doted on his concubines and neglected me. He didn't even step into my chamber once until I was seriously ill. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on the day when the emperor bestowed the marriage, when the emperor asked if I had a man I fancied. I replied, "Your Majesty, I have long been fond of Leonardo Viller. I sincerely hope that your Majesty will grant my wish." As soon as I finished speaking, the prince, who was always aloof and haughty, crushed the wine cup in his hand. When my life was coming to an end, looking back on my life, my memory finally stopped at the day of the marriage bestowed. The memories were like a faded scroll. The emperor asked me with a smile if I had a man I liked at that time. I stood up and slowly knelt down. No one could see the panic in my heart. I knew what I was going to say. My mother had told me before the banquet that the emperor intended to bestow the marriage between me and the prince. The glory of the whole family and the future of everyone in the family were all in my hands at that moment. Who could have imagined that I would end up spitting blood and dying? Seeing the tragedy was irreversible and the impending doom was about to fall, I was extremely anxious. Just before I spoke, I suddenly regained my 5 senses and was no longer a powerless onlooker. My words came out even before I could fully think. "Your Majesty, I have long been fond of Leonardo Viller. I sincerely hope that your Majesty will grant my wish." The hall was brightly lit with the sounds of music in my ears. I trembled slightly and placed my hand on my chest. There was no more the lingering pain that I had endured for years. After spitting blood and dying, I was reborn. However, the prince, who was always aloof and haughty, once again crushed the wine cup in his hand. On the wedding night of my previous life, before I could even drink the nuptial wine, the news of my sister's self-immolation came. The Schaefer mansion was in ruins among the broken walls and debris. My sister's personal maid knelt in front of me, sobbing uncontrollably. Before she died, the young lady asked me to ask you, with thousands of men in the world, why did you have to steal her sweetheart? As she spoke, she took out a letter and presented it to the prince. "The one who has been in love with you has always been our second young lady, not Crown Princess." I can't remember what the prince said at that time. I can only remember his pale face and mysterious eyes. From then on, I was just a nominal crown princess. Concubines and maids gradually filled the eastern palace. Everyone knew that the prince treated me. Suddenly, I felt a bit tired and didn't want to pay attention to his despicable tricks. I turned around and wanted to leave, but a memorial was suddenly thrown at my feet. It was densely filled with remarks accusing my father. Whether to present it to the emperor or keep it suppressed depends entirely on what the crown princess decides to do. The prince watched me with a look of dilemma, resting his chin in his hand and curling his lips into a cold smile. Leonardo Villa was wearing a deep purple brocade robe with flowing cloud patterns. The collar was loose, revealing a section of his pale white collarbone. His slender fingers were laying with a wine cup, and Leonardo Villa, as expected of a mischievous devil, had such a thick skin that he didn't even raise an eyebrow when the prince undermined him in front of everyone. He smiled and said, as the saying goes, "One should start a family first and then establish a career once I'm married. Oh, my temperament become more stable." The prince glanced at him with a dark look in his eyes. Well, he thought that the one in love with him was me, so naturally he would try to stop this marriage. "Father Emperor, I promise that if I get married, I won't cause any trouble for the next year, no, 3 years. He put aside the wine cup, sat upright, and actually looked quite serious. The emperor gave him a glare and then looked at me. "It's not easy for you to have such infatuation, but have you really thought it through?" I replied affirmatively again. The emperor didn't immediately bestow the marriage between me and Leonardo Villa. Leonardo Villa was the son of the imperial noble consort. Although he was about the same age as me, His reputation was completely the opposite of mine. I was dignified, virtuous, and gentle. He was arrogant and mischievous. I was proficient in the 4 arts of music, chess, calligraphy, and painting, while he didn't know a single word of the 4 books and 5 classics. He caused trouble all day long and threw his weight around. Any noble lady in the capital would turn pale at the mention of him, for fear of being taken a fancy to by him. Presumptuous. How can you act as you please in matters of marriage? They clearly knew how much pain I had endured because of my sister's death, yet when they received news about my sister, they still chose to hide it. In my previous life, Eleanor Schaefer followed the rules and regulations, engraved virtue and propriety deeply in her bones, and regarded the family's honor as everything, but in the end she ended up being bullied by everyone, given a second chance at life. I don't want any of that anymore. So, what if he's a mischievous devil? I like him, so naturally I don't care about those groundless rumors. My father was so angry that his face turned pale and green. He trembled and said, "Good. Very good. I never knew I had raised such a shameless daughter. There's more than one thing." I raised the corners of my lips. "My sister is ill today and didn't go to the banquet." "So, father probably doesn't know," I sighed. "The prince and my sister have had contacts for a long time and privately pledged to marry each other." As soon as I said this, both my father and mother were stunned. There was a commotion in Tangley Courtyard, and I'm afraid it won't be peaceful for the next few days. I took the opportunity to leave the mansion. In the dim and gloomy alley, Leonardo Viller was already waiting for me. My entanglement with him to be traced back to my previous life. In the early years, the imperial noble consort was sent to the cold palace and treated Leonardo Viller very coldly. He almost died of illness. It was I who invited the imperial physician for him and saved his life. A life-saving grace should be repaid with my body. Hearing my footsteps, Leonardo Viller turned around with a half-smile on his face. "Eleanor Schaefer, do you really want to marry me?" I nodded. "I saved your life, and you helped me get out of the Schaefer mansion, and we'll be even." He raised his eyebrows. "So all that about being in love with me, and only wanting to marry me by my side." Under the overwhelming fear and sorrow, even my tears dried up just like thousands of times before. I admitted my fault to the prince and begged for his forgiveness. The prince didn't say a word. He grabbed me and pulled me onto the horse. His gloomy gaze swept past Leonardo Viller, and he gave a provocative smile. In my previous life, I voluntarily walked into the cage for the Schaefer family. In this life, I will live only for myself. When I returned to the Schaefer mansion, unfortunately, I ran into the prince. "Eleanor Schaefer." The prince frowned and grabbed my wrist. "Why do you want to marry Leonardo Viller? Is there some unspeakable secret?" I looked expressionless and released his grip. "Your Highness has mistaken me for someone else. The person you've been longing for is not me, but my sister." The prince stood there in a daze, unable to believe it. "She was young and naughty and pretended to be me to fall in love with your Highness. Your Highness should not know about this yet." "No." His face darkened. "You're lying to me, for the sake of Leonardo Viller, aren't you?" I laughed scornfully. "Since your Highness doesn't believe me, why not go into the mansion and see for yourself?" Isabella Schaefer was having a quarrel with our parents. How could I miss such a good show? As soon as I stepped into the gate of Tangley Courtyard, I heard my father asking anxiously, "The person the prince wants to marry is clearly your elder sister. How did you develop feelings for the prince?" I pretended to be my elder sister and got to know the prince anyway. "The person His Highness loves is me. The person he wants to marry is also me." Beside me, the prince's breath trembled slightly, and his face turned pale. Before he could say anything, Isabella Schaefer choked up and said, "My love for the prince is genuine." If this love cannot be tolerated, Isabella Schaefer can only atone for her sins with death. As she spoke, she was about to throw herself against the wall. "Your Highness, Isabella Schaefer's eyes were filled with tears, and she couldn't believe it. Those poems were actually written for me by you. The prince held her in his arms, but his tone was a bit tense. Isabella Schaefer lowered her eyes, hiding the fleeting look of guilt. It has always been Isabella Schaefer who has known your highness. She didn't answer the question directly. It was her who had known the prince. My father's solemn expression relaxed a little. Isabella Schaefer wanted the title, and my father wanted the reputation. With this commotion, they finally got what they wanted. Sister? Isabella Schaefer finally saw me. She instinctively stood up straight, looking a bit guilty. I smiled lightly and said, "Congratulations, sister, your wish has come true." Isabella Schaefer hid behind the prince. Looking wrong, the prince's gaze fell on me. A bit cold. "However, I'd like to know how you found out about the matter between me and Isabella Schaefer," I said casually. "If you don't want others to know, you'd better not do it." The prince's face turned even uglier. He sniffed and said to my father, "I think your eldest daughter is quite sharp-tongued." My father lowered his head and secretly glared at me. "It's my fault for not teaching her well. I will punish her to kneel in the ancestral hall and reflect on her mistakes. They have always been restrained and polite and have never been severely punished. In the past, it was always the troublemaking Isabella Schaefer who knelt in the ancestral hall." Now, seeing that she was about to become the crown princess, I, the one who exposed the truth, became the sinner, but I just curled the corners of my lips, showing neither grievance nor anger. "I can't do that. I'm going to go boating on the lake with Leonardo Viller later." "You?" My father stared wide-eyed, his face turning red with anger. "You unfilial daughter, how dare you still say such things?" I let out a helpless sigh. "Leonardo Viller has a bad temper. If he doesn't see me at the appointed time, he might come to the mansion to look for me." At this moment, I actually felt grateful for Leonardo Viller's notorious reputation relying on the emperor's favor. He acted without scruple, and even the prince couldn't do anything to him. Not long after I finished speaking, a series of footsteps came. The butler ran over, sweating, and stopped just in time. He said, trembling, "Why, Madame, Leonardo Viller's guards are outside the mansion. They said that if they can't pick up the eldest young lady, they will tear down the roof of the Schaefer mansion." Everyone present, except me, looked extremely ugly. Isabella Schaefer thought that with the prince's support, she could manipulate me at will. Unfortunately, her plan failed. A perfunctorily curtsy, Lena Schaefer takes her leave. "Are you spying on me?" In the painted boat, Leonardo Viller and I looked at each other. The so-called boating on the lake was just my random excuse. Leonardo Viller's people appeared at the right time. I didn't believe in coincidences. Sure enough, Leonardo Viller smiled and said, "Yes, I helped you once, RN. You going to thank me?" "Thank you," I said inferiorly. "How long are you going to spy on me?" Leonardo Viller seemed to think for a moment, resting his chin in his hand and staring straight at me. "Until the day you fulfill your long-cherished wish." He was silent for a moment. "How do you know what my long-cherished wish is?" Leonardo Viller smiled very beautifully. He picked up a folding fan and tapped the direction in front of my chest. "Hatred fills your heart, and the countless hatreds in your eyes can hardly be hidden." I instinctively touched the corner of my eye. Was my hatred really that hard to hide? You'd rather marry me than the prince. So, it's not hard to guess who you're hating, is it? The young man smiled playfully, and his gaze fixed on my face. I lowered my eyes and thought for a while, then nodded. "Yes, I hate him." Seeing my candor, Leonardo Viller smiled even more deeply and personally poured me a cup of tea. "The imperial edict of the marriage bestowed by the emperor for you and me will be delivered to the Schaefer mansion tomorrow. As the saying goes, husband and wife are one. I will naturally help you." I raised my eyes and met those beautiful almond-shaped eyes, full of inquiry and scrutiny. "Are you willing to offend the real prince for a fake wife?" Leonardo Viller smiled faintly, his voice as clear as jade. The Empress almost forced me and my mother to death in the cold palace. I will definitely avenge this. This explanation made me feel much more at ease. The imperial edicts of marriage bestowed arrived at the Schaefer mansion together. Isabella Schaefer's wedding date was set for the 8th day of the 8th lunar month. My wedding date was a month later than hers, but it happened to be on the day of Isabella Schaefer's and my birthday. Sister, do you regret it? Isabella Schaefer couldn't hide the pride and joy between her brows. I asked in return. I'm just curious. Why did you pretend to be me and get to know the prince? We were twins and looked 70% alike when we were young. My sister often played the game of swapping identities. She was lively by nature and couldn't pretend for long before being recognized by her parents. Hearing this, Isabella Schaefer's eyes darkened, and she bit her lip. Everyone in the capital knows that you, sister, are gentle, virtuous, and the most talented woman. During this period, I had close contacts with Leonardo Viller, not caring about other people's opinions at all. A reputation that people used to praise me gradually became disreputable. Isabella Schaefer was the future crown princess, and her status was different from before wherever she went. She was the center of attention. The noble ladies who used to surround me were now all by Isabella Schaefer's side. They praised her from her clothes to her jewelry, making Isabella Schaefer laugh continuously. Stop teasing me it. Not that I'm stingy, but this gold hairpin was given by the prince. It can't be damaged. The prince is really infatuated with you. He actually gave you such a precious piece of jewelry. The jade inlaid on it was warm and white, but I didn't want to look at it a second time. In my previous life, the prince personally inserted that gold hairpin into my hair and took me to pay respects to the Empress after returning to the Eastern Palace. He made me kneel in the cold ancestral hall and copy the scriptures all night long. He wanted me to atone for my sins to Isabella Schaefer. Yes, Isabella Schaefer is really blessed and like your sister. Who could have she's really short-sighted. Maybe they had an affair long ago. What kind of dignified and talented woman? Who knows what dirty things she might have done behind the scenes? I really couldn't tell before. She actually has such seductive abilities. They all laughed together, just as I was thinking about whether the pot of wine in my hand was enough to pour on everyone's heads. The screen separating the seats was split open with a sword. The young man was wearing a magnificent purple robe, and his beautiful face was captivating, but no one could ignore the long sword in his hand to admire his beauty. What are you talking about? Let me hear it too. The noble ladies just now huddled together in fear, trying their best not to scream. Leonardo Viller had a smile on his lips, but his tone was very impatient. Speak. Isabella Schaefer trembled all over and instinctively looked at me. I raised a smile and said, They said I'm short-sighted, not loving the beautiful jade but the stubborn stone. Leonardo Viller raised his eyebrows and said, Oh? Who is the beautiful jade and who is the stubborn stone? He asked this, but he didn't wait for an answer. He just waved his sword. The gold hairpin on Isabella Schaefer's head fell to the ground with a clear sound. Oops! The beautiful jade is broken. Isabella Schaefer finally couldn't bear it anymore and burst into tears. She pointed out Leonardo Viller and said, trembling, Why, and the future crown princess, how dare you? Using the prince to pressure me? Leonardo Viller smiled coldly. Do you think if those words just now spread out, you can still wash away the reputation of being disrespectful to your elder sister and gossiping? After all, she was just a 16-year-old girl. She didn't dare to gamble with her own reputation, and Leonardo Viller had a notorious reputation. Not a single person present dared to accuse him. Isabella Schaefer swallowed her anger forcefully. There was a hint of fierceness in her gaze towards me. Helena Schaefer, when did I ever teach you to bully your younger sister outside? How on earth have you become so willful and mischievous? Father's face was filled with anger and disappointment. Isabella Schaefer sat beside, sniffling and sobbing. It was her own slip of the tongue that displeased Leonardo Viller. What does it have to do with me? Seeing my indifferent expression, father grew even more irritated. How dare you quibble? Not only did you not stop Leonardo Viller, but you also added fuel to the fire. I suppressed the annoyance and weariness welling up in my heart. She disrespected her elder sister first. Does father really think it's my fault? Father furrowed his brow but didn't immediately retort. Miss Schaefer is indeed eloquent. A voice came from behind. It was the Crown Prince. He walked into the hall and tenderly wiped away Isabella Schaefer's tears. I can't bear to see my beloved being wronged, Imperial Tutor. Regarding what happened yesterday, I must seek justice for Isabella Schaefer. Father closed his eyes and then opened them again, raising his voice. Bring the family discipline instrument. Isabella Schaefer let out a cry of alarm and whispered softly, "Isn't this a bit too harsh?" The Crown Prince let out a sigh. "You're just too kind-hearted, which is why you're being bullied like this." I looked at the soft whip presented by the maid instead of seeking help from Leonardo Viller's spies. I looked at Father. "Father, do you really want to punish me?" Father's face was stern as he picked up the soft whip. The answer was clear. In my previous life, I died too quickly to confront my parents now. There's no need for that anymore. I let out a soft laugh. Fine after this. I won't owe you anything. When the whip came down, Isabella Schaefer let out a cry and turned her head away. The Crown Prince held her in his arms, shielding her from this unpleasant sight. After 10 lashes, Tinglan, with tears in her eyes, stepped forward to support me. I felt the searing, sharp pain on my back, but I wasn't overly sad. This can be considered as repayment for the kindness of my upbringing. I have no more connection with the Schaefer family. On the day Isabella Schaefer got married, the capital city was filled with joy and festivity. Our parents gave her an extremely generous dowry. Since hers was more, mine was naturally less, but I couldn't be bothered to argue over the dowry. In the past few months, I used the memories of my previous life to jot down one by one the styles of clothes, jewelry, and makeup that would be popular in the coming years. Then, I took the lead and made a fortune. Father used to teach me that money and valuables were too vulgar and unimportant. Now, I certainly don't believe such nonsense in the Eastern Palace. Without money or favor, it's extremely difficult to get by. With enough money, I can be carefree and unrestrained wherever I go. As it was getting dark, instead of staying at the banquet, I quietly slipped away with Leonardo Viller. When the lanterns were lit and the streets were bustling with people, the whole capital city was alive with the excitement of the Crown Prince's wedding. Free from the constraints of etiquette and morality, I walked on the street without a care in the world, feeling that everything around me was vivid and bright. A rather simple but lovely rabbit-shaped lantern caught my eye. "You've been looking at it. Do you like it?" I took the lantern and, without any shyness, nodded. A noble lady from a prominent family was supposed to be dignified and elegant, and it was unthinkable for her to have anything to do with a roadside rabbit lantern. For Leonardo Viller and me, all these rules became a joke. We strolled past one stall after another. The bells under the eaves jingled, and the lanterns cast a soft glow, until the dark night sky was suddenly illuminated by bursts of gorgeous fireworks. Leonardo Viller pulled me into an alley and covered my ears in an instant. The noise was blocked out. The golden and fiery light fell on Leonardo Viller's magnificent face, bringing out a smile on his lips that was as gentle as the melting spring snow. I looked up and met his gaze. Countless lights and shadows filled my eyes. I couldn't hear anything clearly, and it felt as if there was a bead that had broken free from its string in my chest. The sound of it hitting the ground seemed a bit too loud. Leonardo Viller looked down at me with an unprecedented tenderness and earnestness, just as I thought he was about to say something. "Elena Schaefer." A hand firmly grasped my arm, startled. I turned my head to look. It was the Crown Prince, who should have been in the bridal chamber. He stood in front of me, looking flustered and trembling all over. Ever since the day Elena Schaefer publicly announced that she was going to marry Leonardo Viller, Adrian Viller had been in a daze. At first, he thought that Elena Schaefer had betrayed him. Later, when he learned that it was Isabella Schaefer who had been in love with him, his daze didn't subside in the slightest. Instead, it became even more pronounced. Adrian Viller always felt that that day shouldn't have been like that. Elena Schaefer shouldn't have married Leonardo Viller. Yet, the one he had feelings for was clearly Isabella Schaefer. Perhaps it was because Isabella Schaefer had pretended to be her sister's character when she was with him that he had these thoughts. Adrian Viller suppressed the restlessness in his heart and tried to get along with Isabella Schaefer as he used to. It always felt strange. Because of this strangeness, he particularly loathed Elena Schaefer, so he constantly made things difficult for her. Adrian Viller could have suppressed this odd feeling and gradually forgotten about it. Had it seemed that fate had its own plan, like retribution. After he married Isabella Schaefer in the traditional ceremony, memories came flooding back. The 3 years he had spent with Elena Schaefer. The substitutes in the Eastern Palace didn't just resemble Isabella Schaefer. They also resembled her. Adrian Viller would never admit that he had developed feelings for Elena Schaefer, so he tortured her even more severely. It wasn't until Elena Schaefer died and he discovered that Isabella Schaefer's death was a fake that Adrian Viller realized it was too late. Elena Schaefer didn't want him anymore. In this life, she had chosen Leonardo Viller. As soon as the veil was lifted, Adrian Viller, ignoring Isabella Schaefer's terrified gaze, rushed out like a madman. An endless wave of fear engulfed him, as if he was deathly afraid that if he was even a second late, something irreparable would happen. Adrian Viller searched through the bustling crowding, found Elena Schaefer in an alley. She was holding a cheap lantern in her hand, standing under the fireworks, and was very close to Leonardo Viller. Adrian Viller was shocked as if struck by lightning, and then he rushed forward regardless of everything. He grabbed her on. He suppressed the overwhelming regret, despair, and jealousy in his heart, and his voice trembled at the end. Elena Schaefer, am I too late? Adrian Viller had always been arrogant and haughty, looking down on everyone. Now, he was acting like a madman, disregarding all decorum and dignity, and appearing on the street on his wedding night. Brother, you've mistaken. Your bride is waiting for you in the Eastern Palace now, Leonardo Viller said kindly as he pried the Crown Prince's hand off me. Shut up. The Crown Prince's face was almost ferocious, and his eyes were filled with hatred as he looked at Leonardo Viller. When did it become your business to interfere in my affairs with Elena Schaefer? This was simply outrageous. Leonardo Viller, the rightful fiancé, was almost driven to laughter by his behavior. If you're delirious, brother, go find an imperial doctor. Elena Schaefer is my fiancée, and it has nothing to do with you. The Crown Prince gritted his teeth and said, You took advantage of the situation to seduce Elena Schaefer. I haven't settled the score with you yet. I suddenly burst out laughing. The moment the Crown Prince appeared here, I knew that he had also been reborn. The fact that he had come to find me in such an extraordinary way should mean that he knew about Isabella Schaefer's fake death. I curled the corners of my lips and took Leonardo Viller's hand. I raised an eyebrow, then leaned over and stood on tiptoe, planting a kiss on Leonardo Viller's cheek. Leonardo Viller's eyes widened in surprise, his breath caught in his throat, and the hand holding mine became stiff. I looked at the Crown Prince. Your Highness, do you still want to watch? The Crown Prince's eyes were as red as if they had been stained with blood, and his fists were clenched tightly. The look in his eyes was a mixture of anger, disbelief, and a hint of grievance. I took Leonardo Viller's hand and was about to leave. Elena Schaefer, the Crown Prince said anxiously, with a faint trace of a sob in his voice. I've done many wrong things, but please give me a chance to make up for them. Okay? I can give you power, wealth, and love. He took out a marriage contract with great care, but it wasn't written with ink. Instead, it had a strange dark red color. He seemed to find his question extremely ridiculous and sneered. Because you don't deserve it. Adrian Viller was despicable, hypocritical, and didn't deserve my forgiveness. Everything changed completely. The glorious and loving life she had imagined was shattered into pieces, just like that gold hairpin. The servants in the Eastern Palace all knew that the Crown Princess wasn't loved by the Crown Prince. In fact, he even loathed her. Her situation became even more difficult. On the wedding night, there was none of the expected love and intimacy after lifting the veil. I got straight to the point. The Crown Prince is in a state of confusion. Now this is the perfect opportunity for us to bring him down. Leonardo Villar's hand in my dress rose slightly, and then he withdrew it, smiling sheepishly. "You're right. But do we really have to discuss this tonight?" I gave him a questioning look. Then I understood. "I didn't expect you to care so much about the ceremony. It was just a fake marriage, but you wanted to go through all the motions." Leonardo Villar picked up the nuptial wine. "Who knows? Maybe this is the only marriage I'll have in my life, of course. I want it to be perfect." Helpless, I drank the nuptial wine with him. It actually gave us a bit of the feeling of a real marriage. The next day, news came from the Eastern Palace that the Crown Princess had passed away last night. My hand holding the chess piece paused slightly. The Crown Prince was really heartless. He let Isabella Schaefer die on her birthday. It's like killing someone and breaking their spirit. When I went to the Eastern Palace for the grand morning, the Crown Prince was dressed in white, looking emaciated. A door closed behind me. "We were the only two people in the solemn hall. Isabella Schaefer is dead." The Crown Prince stroked the coffin and suddenly spoke. "The culprit who caused us to have such a deep misunderstanding and not have a good ending is dead." He raised his eyes, his face beaming with an inexplicable look. "You and I, Schaefer, we can start over now. He was probably going crazy." The culprit. I chewed on these for words and shook my head. Isabella Schaefer is indeed hateful. But the root cause of my suffering for several years and my death from spitting blood is you, Adrian Villar. If he had been a bit more kind-hearted, he would have found out that I was innocent. If he had been a bit more patient, he would have listened to my explanation. But he didn't. He just arbitrarily convicted me, and then tortured me, until I spat blood and died. I was only 19 when I died. Other noble ladies either had their parents by their side or were married. In any case, their lives were just beginning. Only I was tortured by my husband, until I was emaciated and my life hung by a thread. I longed to live more than anyone else. It was Adrian Villar who personally snuffed out my hope. I'm willing to atone for my sins. Adrian Villar's eyes were bloodshot, his expression agitated, and he drew out his sword. "You can stab me a few times as long as you forgive me." I smiled slightly and walked slowly over to him. Taking the sword from him, then I stabbed it mercilessly into his shoulder. Adrian Villar let out a muffled groan, but endured the pain and even managed to smile at me. I pulled out the sword. With a clang, the sword and the drops of blood fell to the ground, the red color glaringly bright. I was deep in thought. But now, I'm Leonardo Villar's wife, your Highness's sister-in-law, even if I forgive you. Adrian Villar was almost insane and had long lost his sanity. Half a month later, the Crown Prince led his troops to force the Emperor to abdicate. "Father Emperor, issue the edict." The Emperor coughed a few times, his face turning red. "You're already the Crown Prince? Why are you in such a hurry?" At this point, he was already a deposed Crown Prince. In the dim and damp prison, be in a sorry plight. Adrian Villar was raving and muttering to himself. "No, don't marry him. It was really ironic. It was he who had forced me to death, and now it was he who was filled with regret. I'm sorry, Eleanor Schaefer. I truly love you." I took half a step back to avoid his movement. "But your love makes me feel sick if you really feel sorry for me. Then die," I said calmly. Upon hearing this, the hope in Adrian Villar's eyes completely vanished. He laughed and cried at the same time. "Do you really want me to die?" I nodded. Either in the past life or this life, you've never had a kind thought towards me. Just thinking of you brings me nothing but pain. The Emperor didn't kill him, but I wanted him to die. Only by taking his life could those old grudges be settled. The moment I stepped out of the prison, I heard the prison guard behind me exclaim, "The deposed crown prince has committed suicide." I raised my head and looked at the clouds and birds in the sky. I smiled softly. The Emperor didn't have many children. After Adrian Villard died, he could only cultivate the still young fourth prince. After all, Leonardo Villard had a well-known reputation and had openly said that he wanted to travel with me. The Emperor really couldn't make him the crown prince. In the carriage leaving the capital, Leonardo Villard arrived before me. The originally simple carriage had been decorated by him into something brand new. Seeing my surprised look, he rubbed the tip of his nose. "The capital city is so boring. I also want to go to Jinling with you. You won't doctor me away, will you?" The young man lowered his eyes with his cautious look in that delicate face. It made my heart soften for no reason. I got into the carriage and said, unhurriedly, "So that talk about revenge before." Leonardo Villard lowered his head even more, and his voice was as soft as a mosquito's hum when he retorted, It wasn't all faked. His appearance reminded me of the cat I had raised when I was a child. When it made a mistake, it would also look guilty, but try to act tough. I suddenly let out a soft laugh and said gently, "Leonardo Villard, let's go to Jinling together." Leonardo Villard suddenly raised his head, and a smile that he couldn't suppress spread across his lips. The sky was bright, and the carriage wheels rolled over the fallen leaves, leaving the majestic imperial city behind like a speck of dust in the distance. We still have a long life ahead of us.